So, today I wanted to talk about Ernie Kovacs' novel ZOOMAR, which is the only novel he ever wrote. Which is a shame, but this novel itself is enough. I think it's, for him to leave this behind. And I actually have a bit of family history with Ernie Kovacs. So when I was a kid, my mom would always tell me that my grandmother was related to Ernie Kovacs, and my mom's side of the family is Hungarian, and Ernie Kovacs was very much Hungarian, and she would tell me that my grandmother, who lived in Trenton at the time, and Ernie Kovacs was, I think, related by her cousin or something, but she had a picture of him in his the radio station in Trenton, and I'd always hear about this photo, but I never got to see it. I don't even know if it exists anymore, but that got me interested. But it wasn't until I got into college and I looked up Ernie Kovacs' stuff that it really clicked with me, because it was so strange and so imaginative and inventive, and I think I never got to, I slowly appreciated it over time. But his work, I think I felt like I found like a kindred soul in some of the things that he did, especially with the humor, the weird surreal quality of it, and also especially with his love of music and using imagery in combination with music. But the years go by and I hear about this book ZOOMAR, and it wasn't until I was at this 100th birthday celebration for Ernie Kovacs in Bordentown, New Jersey, and I think one of later son, not Ernie Kovacs' son, but a son of Edie Adams, had he was hosting this event and talking about Ernie Kovacs, and it was at this kind of vintage collectibles store, and they had a copy of ZOOMAR there, and I got this it was $20. So this is even several years ago. This, I guess, it was pretty scarce, but it took me several years to actually get down to reading it. But I read it last year, and I gotta say, it's kind of a hidden gem. I know people like name drop Ernie Kovacs and stuff, but I think this book is definitely an overlooked gem, which I think that somewhat of a diamond in the rough, but I think there's a lot of it to recommend. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it was written very briskly. I'm not sure. I think I hear that he wrote it in a very quick amount of time, like in sort of the spurt of energy and creativity. And I think that a lot of the good qualities about the book come from his insight into the television industry, because Ernie Kovacs knew that from inside out, from its inception, basically. Because he started in radio, then went to television, and a lot of the stuff you read in there just feels like fly on the wall debate banter in these offices, and and the great thing about it is a satirical novel, but it is also a very informative one about the goings on, workings behind the scenes, up to a point, and then it becomes more of a sort of more of a drama between these characters. It kind of gets into various different territories. It's a little all over the place, but it's very it reads very briskly, very, very smoothly. I think that it was not a slog, even though it clocks in at like 340 some odd pages. But I would say, if you're not put off by a lot of being dropped in the thick of a Mad Men type world, if you can weather that, but I know some people can't really I think, you know, it's really fascinating, and I think it's a lot of the stuff you get in there. And it's also very funny, like just some of the humor, and the satire in there, coming at it from that time in the industry. So it was written in 1957, which, it was like television was the medium, like at that time, and I think that when you're reading this, it's way more informative than I think something today being written about this period now, obviously. But you've also got Ernie Kovacs' wit, and he pokes at himself a few times. He name drops himself, and almost in a dismissive way, or just he's voicing some opinions of his critics about his work, and it even mentions certain things or images or ideas that popped up in some of his skits or vignettes. But the main character is this guy who went basically ascends into, the world of television executives, but he's not one of them in a sense, and so he kind of does these sort of things where, he'll reflect on the niceties of how to respond to an idea, and sort of like, it's like, oh, this person has an idea, but he thought of saying, oh, that's perfect, but then it's like, if I say perfect, then they might call into question my own standards and ways of appraising things. So if I say near perfect, then they could, I temper it more. So it's just all about this. A lot of that is maneuvering and politics and whatnot. And I'm sorry if you hear like some weed whacker or something going on. I can't escape the landscaping during the summer. But I would say that a lot of those parts are very interesting, and the whole premise is kind of circles around this beauty pageant that's going to be televised called the Miss White-Bola pageant, which is already it's a shoe shine polish product, but like just the name itself is ridiculous. But he runs with it. Even people in the book think it's ridiculous. But I think there are a lot of it feels like something that was written very quickly, kind of a stream of consciousness in some cases, but it also is written by somebody who has a lot to say, and so it's not like your time is being wasted. I would also state that I had to wait for the leaf blower to pass. I hope it doesn't come back. That's the thing about doing these in the summer months. But yeah, so the main character in this, he's not exactly a saint. Definitely not. He's often fantasizing about his secretary, even though he has a really lovely wife who he loves. And that element of the story is actually very interesting because it looks into, he has this active fantasy life in his mind. Oh, I miss winter. Anyway, so the main character, Tom, is not somebody who's totally sympathetic, but he's more sympathetic than the people around him who are openly having affairs, doing all kinds of sleazy things, and Tom is flirting with those ideas in his head. And that's something really interesting that Ernie Kovacs kind of looks at, is that the internal world, the imagination, eventually does sort of blossom into reality sometimes. But specifically in this case, where at the end of the book he does sort of spend the night with his secretary. And he even muses on, like, it's like, oh, well, yeah, after all the times of fantasizing about it, I guess this actually, it happened. Of course, in this book, the main character justifies it as, well, I had to do this to realize how much I didn't really want to be with her. But that just comes across as, trying to eat one's cake and have it too. But there is a really fascinating, like really interesting section where he's going off on one of his sort of fantasies about his secretary, and he keeps getting interrupted, and things in his head aren't really staying the way he'd want them to. Like a button on a sleeve, is like too big, and it's like stuck that way in his head, and he can't change it, and he's getting distracted. So someone else interrupts him, and he's finally like getting back to it. And in one section, it says, Karen set down the tray and put out the light switch. The wall switch was about 15 feet from where she was, but her arm got kind of longer and the wall a little closer at the same time. It moved back after the lights went off, but the one arm hung a little longer than the other, about 7 inches. He decided that he just wasn't in the right frame of mind for one of the sexy daydreams. And I just thought that I'd never read before in a book an author actually describing like what it's like to like imagine something in your head and like keep all the details consistent in some ways, especially if you're really focused on it. That's just like one of the standout parts in that. But I would definitely call this underrated. I'd recommend it. It's not going to be for everybody. I think the cover does not misrepresent the book. I would say bawdy, uproarious, and makes Peyton Place seem a kindergarten. It's sensational, but it's a lot of fun. And if you enjoy this sort of thing, I would recommend it. But I'm not great at analyzing books or examining in the best ways why they work and why they don't, but I would just say what works for me or what didn't, and I think that's probably why you're watching this video anyway. So I think the only novel from Ernie Kovacs tragically died way too young, but we've got a lot of great stuff from him. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Oh yeah, and all the issues of Lishka #1 that are being printed are arriving today, so there should soon be an announcement about how to get those. So stay tuned. Bye.